The nurse asked if I wanted to list the real father on the birth certificate, and my wife just stared at the floor. No laugh, no protest, not even a glance my way, just silence. And that silence cracked something wide open, because this wasn't the first time she went quiet. Late nights at work, missed calls, excuses stacked like bricks I didn't want to see. But now, I couldn't unsee it. My name is Daniel, and this is the story of how my son's birth shattered the family I thought I had. Let me start here. I always wanted to be a dad. Not in the vague, someday kind of way. I mean, really wanted it. The kind of man who picked out baby names before he picked out the nursery paint. I had this image in my head, growing up, coaching Little League, packing lunchboxes, building dollhouses. I didn't care if it was a boy or girl. I just wanted someone to love who called me dad. I married Megan 3 years ago. She was quick-witted, polished, the kind of woman who knew how to work a room without even trying. I was quieter. A high school English teacher who wore scuffed boots and still believed in handwritten letters. Megan worked in marketing, all strategy and spin. People like her always seem a step ahead. People like me? We just hope we're not too far behind. The nurse smiled, clipboard in hand. And just to confirm, she said, are we listing the biological father or legal guardian only? Her tone was polite, routine, like she'd asked the same question a dozen times that day. Megan just sat there. No clarification, no correction, not even a glance in my direction, just silence. Later, the nurse would say it was standard, a paperwork formality some states require when paternity isn't medically documented. Nothing personal. But in that moment, that silence told me everything the form couldn't. And that's when my world tilted. Because the woman I loved, the woman I married, the woman I believed in, didn't immediately say, of course, he's the father. She looked away. And something in my chest, something old and soft, broke clean in two. And that's when my world tilted. I didn't ask the nurse anything else. I just nodded, wrote my name, and left the room to get coffee. I didn't get coffee. I sat in the hospital stairwell, staring at the floor, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of the question I didn't want to ask. Why didn't she defend me? Why didn't she say it? Unless she couldn't. I stayed in that stairwell for a long time. Long enough for the day to shift. Long enough for doubt to settle in like dust on an unopened letter. And when I came back up, Megan was asleep, or pretending to be. I watched her for a long time. Watched my son in that clear bassinet next to her. He was beautiful. He was everything. But for the first time, I wasn't sure if he was mine. Not in the way I thought he was. And the scariest part? I didn't know who to ask. Because the only person who could tell me the truth had already told me too much with her silence. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Asked if I wanted to hold him. Said she liked the name we'd picked out, Caleb. Not do you still want to name him that? Not should we talk about what the nurse said? Just like we were still on the same page. But I wasn't. I wasn't even in the same book anymore. I held Caleb anyway. Of course I did. He curled into my chest like he belonged there. Tiny, warm, perfect. He didn't know about forms or doubts or what a well-placed silence could destroy. I wanted to believe I was his father. With everything in me, I did. But that nurse's question was a crack in the glass. And once you see the break, you can't unsee it. Later that day, when Megan's sister came to visit, I excused myself and stepped outside. I needed air. I needed time. And I needed answers I was afraid to ask for. I called my best friend, Mike. We'd coached JV baseball together, built IKEA furniture side by side, stood as each other's best men. He was the one person I trusted with the whole truth. He picked up on the second ring. You okay, man? I told him everything. The nurse. The pause. The way Megan looked away. He didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, he was quiet. Then he said, you want me to ask around? Ask who? Mike had a cousin, Rachel, who worked at the same firm as Megan. Not directly with her, but enough to hear things. Office parties. Loose talk. Things people say when they think no one's paying attention. I hesitated, then said yes. Because I needed to know if there was a reason she couldn't answer that nurse. That night, Megan slept. Or pretended to again. And I sat in that stiff hospital recliner, scrolling back through old texts. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe proof I hadn't imagined it. The way her answers got shorter that fall. The work's insane texts that always came around the same time of night. The missed calls I chalked up to bad reception or late meetings. Back then, I didn't question it. Told myself love means giving benefit of the doubt. But sitting there, with the weight of her silence still in my chest, I started to wonder if I'd been giving away that benefit too freely. I opened our thread from the months before Caleb was conceived, and saw it. The gaps. Whole weeks where her name barely lit up my screen. Vague replies. Out-of-town client dinners. Nights she said she was working late, but came home without the usual exhaustion in her eyes. At the time, I bought it. I wanted to believe it. But now? Every missing message felt like a breadcrumb I'd chosen not to follow. I went at her Instagram next. She hadn't posted much that fall. Just one photo stood out, a wine bar, a charcuterie board, 2 glasses. Caption, finally a night to breathe. Wine glass. No tags. No friend in the photo. And I hadn't been there. I remembered that night. I was at parent-teacher conferences. I brought her home takeout. She said she was too tired to eat. Now, I couldn't stop thinking, who had the second glass? The next day, Mike called. He didn't mince words. She was seen with someone. A guy named Brandon. Works in legal. Used to date her in college, apparently. Rachel says it wasn't official, but people noticed. Drinks after work. Coffee runs. A weekend conference they both attended in Boston alone. I felt the floor shift beneath me again. Boston. She'd said it was a solo trip. A training seminar. I'd packed her bag. Ironed her blazer. And she never once mentioned Brandon. Mike paused, then said, "You want me to look into him?" I told him no. Because I already knew what came next. I had to ask her, face to face. I had to ask the woman I loved, if our son might not be mine. It was almost midnight when I stood by her hospital bed. Caleb was asleep, swaddled tight, dreaming his first dreams. Megan was half awake, groggy from the meds, eyes glassy. I said her name once. Softly. She looked at me. I asked the question without fanfare, without anger. Was there someone else? Her face didn't change. Not at first. Then, her bottom lip quivered. And I knew. She didn't deny it. Didn't deflect. Just whispered. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. That's when I sat down. Because I couldn't stand with that weight pressing on me. You lied to me, I said. Not just about him. About us. About our family. Tears ran down her cheeks, silent and steady. I didn't think I could get pregnant, she said. We tried for so long. I was convinced it wasn't going to happen. And then, after Boston, I found out. And I prayed it was yours. I wanted it to be yours. I looked at Caleb. This child I already loved. This child who might not be mine. You should have told me. I was going to, she said. So many times. But then you were so happy. And I thought, maybe the timing would work. Maybe it wouldn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered because trust isn't something you patch together after the cracks show. It's something you protect, fiercely, even from yourself. I didn't yell. Didn't slam doors. I kissed my son's forehead. Whispered I loved him. Then I walked out of that room. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't know if I'd ever walk back in. I spent the night in the hospital chapel. Not praying. I wouldn't call it that. But sitting in the back pew, staring at the stained glass like it owed me an answer. The quiet was thick, sterile. The kind that presses on your chest when your whole life's been cracked open. My son had been born less than 48 hours ago. And already, I was questioning everything he'd been born into. In the morning, I called a lab. Private. Discreet. The kind that doesn't ask too many questions. Told them I needed a paternity test. Fast. They said they could have results in 2 days if I provided a swab and a sample from the baby. I didn't tell Megan. Not because I wanted revenge. Not even because I didn't trust her anymore. But because I needed one moment of truth I could hold in my hands. So when the nurse came to check on Caleb's temperature, I asked if I could have a few minutes alone, just me and my son. She hesitated, then smiled. Of course. I waited until the door closed, then reached into my coat pocket. I held him gently, talked to him like I used to talk to my high school students before a big exam. Soft, steady, like the words themselves could hold the room together. It's not your fault, I said, brushing his cheek with the swab, gentle, quick, careful. He looked up at me, eyes wide, unblinking. And in that moment, I didn't care what any test said. I loved him. God help me, I did. He looked up at me, eyes wide, unblinking. And in that moment, I didn't care what any test said. I loved him. God help me, I did. Megan asked if I was okay. I told her I just needed some air. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell her where I was going. That day felt like sleepwalking. I went through motions, paperwork, calls to family, thank yous to nurses. But every smile I forced was built on top of a question I couldn't stop asking. What happens if he's not mine? Do I walk away? Do I stay? Can you be a father by choice when biology walks out the back door? That night, I finally went home. Alone. The house still had, welcome, baby Caleb, balloons tied to the front porch. A meal from Megan's coworkers was still warm in the crock pot. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at the walls we painted together. The bookshelf she insisted we anchor to the studs. The framed sonogram on the mantel. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But I did whisper her name once, into the silence, just to see if it still sounded like something I belonged to. It didn't. The next morning, I drove to my dad's place. He'd been a father to me in the way only working-class men know how, with calloused hands and quiet loyalty. Never said much, but when he did, you listened. He poured me coffee, sat across the table, and asked what was on my chest. I told him. Every word, every silence, every fear. He didn't flinch, didn't ask for details, just sat there for a while, then said, "Blood doesn't make a man a father. Showing up does." I nodded, but inside, I was still asking, what if showing up means standing in for the man she didn't tell me about? The results came the next evening. I got the notification while sitting in my truck, parked 2 blocks from the house. New message from Lab Portal. Your results are available. I stared at it for a long time. Let my finger hover over the screen like it weighed more than I did. Then I tapped, logged in. 1 line. Centered. Plain. Cold. Probability of paternity. 0%. 0. Not mine. Not even close. I didn't cry. Didn't rage. Just sat there. In a truck full of baby toys and takeout wrappers. Letting silence be the only thing loud enough to hold me. For nearly an hour. Unmoving, unthinking, unraveling. Because in a 2-second sentence, the story I thought I was living, the family I thought I had, disappeared. That night, I returned to the hospital. Megan was awake, rocking Caleb softly, humming some off-key lullaby. She looked up at me surprised, like maybe she thought I wouldn't come back at all. I sat down beside her, handed her the envelope, said nothing. She opened it slowly. Read the line. And when her breath hitched, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not guilt, not fear, just heartbreak. Real. Raw. "I'm sorry," she said. Voice small. "Hollow." "I know," I replied. She looked at me, searching for something. Redemption, maybe. Or punishment. "You still love him?" I asked. Her answer came without hesitation. "Yes." And that's when I realized the truth she couldn't say out loud. She'd fallen in love with a memory of another man and tried to build a life with me on top of it. I kissed Caleb on the forehead. One last time. Then I stood. "You'll get the best version of me," I said. "But not as your husband." She nodded. A slow, aching nod. And as I walked out of that room, wedding ring still on my finger, heart still cracked wide open, I understood something I never did before. Sometimes love ends not with a betrayal, but with a truth too big to stay inside. And now? Now I had to figure out how to love a child who wasn't mine, without losing myself in the process. The hardest part wasn't walking out of that hospital room. It was waking up the next morning, in a house with a nursery I'd painted with my own hands. There was a faint scent of baby powder in the air. The crib was still assembled. The mobile still spun when you tapped it, playing that same lullaby we'd laughed about being too cheesy when we bought it. But we bought it anyway, because it was part of the dream. Now it felt like a prop on a stage I didn't belong to anymore. I sat in that nursery for hours. Didn't touch anything. Didn't cry. Just sat. Because when something you believed in breaks, not loudly, not violently, but slowly, beneath your feet, it takes time for the fall to catch up with you. Megan texted once that day. "He misses you already." I stared at the message. Not because I doubted it, but because I felt the ache of it in my ribs. He missed me, and I missed him, but he wasn't mine. A few days passed, then a week. People started calling, friends, family, coworkers who'd seen the "it's a boy" post and didn't yet know the ending had changed. I didn't answer, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't know how to explain something that still didn't feel real to me. I wasn't angry anymore. I'd moved past that, but I was hollow. Like someone had taken a story I'd written 1,000 times in my head and replaced all the pages overnight. Then came the letter. Not a text, not an email, a real letter, folded neatly, left in my mailbox in an envelope without a return address. It was Megan's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. Inside were 2 pages. No rambling, no begging, just truth. She admitted everything. Said she'd reconnected with Brandon at a company dinner. Said she never meant to betray me, but that she let a feeling grow instead of confronting it. And when she found out she was pregnant, she froze. It wasn't about choosing him, she wrote. It was about not knowing if I'd ever be enough for you again if I told the truth. That line gutted me, because she wasn't wrong. The truth might have shattered us then, too, but at least we would have broken honestly. She ended the letter with this. "I don't expect anything from you. Not a call, not forgiveness. I just want you to know, the way you loved Caleb, it changed me. It taught me what love looks like when it doesn't need to be earned. He may not have your blood, but he had your heart. And I hope, if there's room, he still does. I folded the letter, set it on the counter, and stared at it for a long time. Because the idea of Caleb growing up thinking I vanished, thinking I just disappeared, made something inside me curl up and protest. The next day, I drove back to the hospital to sign a release form. They needed final paperwork on file. Standard stuff. I ran into Megan in the parking lot. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her eyes were tired, red, raw. She froze when she saw me, like she didn't know whether to step toward me or run. I didn't make her choose. I want to be in his life, I said. Not for you. Not for me. For him. Her shoulders shook, just once, like something inside her let go. She nodded. Eyes brimming, lip trembling, breath caught halfway to an apology. Thank you, she whispered, then looked down, like she didn't believe she'd earned it. We didn't talk long, but before I left, she opened the back door of her car. Caleb was in his car seat, asleep, his little fist curled around the edge of a blanket I bought during her second trimester, the one with tiny foxes on it. I reached in, touched his hand. He didn't wake, but his fingers gripped mine instinctively, and in that moment, I stopped needing a piece of paper to tell me who I was. That night, I called my father again, told him the test came back, told him the result. He didn't ask what I planned to do. He just said, some people spend their whole lives waiting for a purpose. Sounds like one found you. So I made a decision, not to go back to Megan, not to pretend none of it happened, but to show up, consistently, for Caleb. Whatever that meant, birthday parties, school plays, late-night fevers. I didn't care. I wanted to be there. Because sometimes, being a father isn't about being first. It's about being there. Always. The first time I saw Caleb again, really saw him, it wasn't through glass or after a sleepless night in a hospital chair. It was on a Tuesday, late October. Cool air, golden leaves, just enough wind to make you feel like something new was starting. Megan stood on my porch, shifting her weight from foot to foot, Caleb in her arms. She didn't knock right away. Just stood there like maybe she was hoping I'd open the door before she had to. I did. Neither of us said much. She handed him to me like she was passing over something fragile. And in that moment, I realized something that surprised even me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't confused or sad or stuck in some cycle of what if. I was just ready to hold him again, ready to show up. The plan was simple at first. 2 visits a week, neutral places. No drama, no lawyers. Megan agreed. She didn't push, didn't try to talk about the past. Just asked what I needed and told me what Caleb liked now, his favorite stuffed animal, his nap window, the lullaby that helped when he fussed. We were strangers again, but this time with a shared purpose. Being with Caleb was easier than I expected. He remembered me, not in language, he didn't talk yet, but in presence. He reached for me without hesitation, settled against my chest like he'd been there yesterday. There was no wariness, no confusion. Kids don't ask for proof, they just feel what's safe. And something in me, something deep and old, finally exhaled. The first time I changed his diaper again, I was clumsy, out of practice. He laughed, that baby laugh, gurgly, like it came from the center of him. It caught me off guard, made my throat tighten, because in that tiny, ridiculous moment, I felt something crack open. Not grief, not pain, joy, pure, simple, unqualified joy. That night, Megan texted, "Thank you. He was so calm after you left." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keys. Then typed, "He's a good kid. Thanks for letting me see him." She replied, "It's not about letting. You're his dad too. You always were." I didn't answer, because sometimes the words you want to say are too big for the screen. Weeks passed. 2 visits became 3, then 4. Before I knew it, I was learning how to pack a diaper bag, singing songs I didn't know I knew, carrying Caleb like second nature. People at the park assumed he was mine, and when they said so, I didn't correct them, because he was, not in blood, but in bond. One afternoon, I took him to the bookstore. Same place Megan and I used to go on Sundays, back when life still felt like a road with one clear direction. I picked out a picture book about animals. He grabbed it with both hands, chewed the corner. Classic move. An older woman sitting nearby smiled at me and said, "First time, Dad?" I paused, then nodded. "Yeah," I said, "but I'm learning." She smiled. "That's all it takes." And just like that, the weight in my chest got a little lighter. Later that week, Megan invited me to stay for dinner. It wasn't romantic. She made spaghetti. Caleb threw half of it on the floor. We laughed, not like we used to, not like we forgot what happened, but like two people who had finally accepted that the past didn't have to poison everything that came next. She caught me watching him, Caleb, as he stacked blocks with this wild focus. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." And I meant it. That night, on the drive home, I rolled the window down and let the cold air hit my face. I wasn't thinking about the DNA test, or the silence in the hospital, or the man she used to love. I was thinking about the way Caleb laughed when I made a monkey noise, the way his eyes lit up when I picked him up from his car seat, the way his tiny hand gripped mine like it meant something, because it did. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just showing up, changing diapers, reading books, holding the weight of a child who doesn't share your name, but shares something deeper. And I was ready to hold it all. By the time Caleb turned 6 months, he started reaching for me every time I walked through the door. Not Megan, not a bottle, me. And every time he did, something deep inside me, something I didn't even know was still wounded, started to heal. We never told him the full story, of course. Not yet. He was too young. But when I fed him, changed him, rocked him to sleep, I wasn't a friend or a helper. I was Dad. Maybe not by biology, but in every way that mattered. One afternoon, I found an old photo on my phone. It was from the baby shower, months before everything unraveled. Megan was smiling. I had my hand on her belly, and in the background, you could just make out the nursery wallpaper we'd spent a whole weekend hanging. I almost deleted it, but I didn't, because that version of us, the one that believed, the one that tried, still deserved to be remembered. Not because it was perfect, but because it mattered. It mattered enough to build something on, even if the foundation cracked. Megan and I never got back together. That's probably the part people wonder about most. We co-parent now, peacefully, respectfully, with a kind of quiet grace that only comes after walking through fire and making it out the other side, scorched, yes, but still standing. There's no anger anymore. No blame. Just a shared understanding. We both made choices that broke something, and we both chose to stay for the one thing that never did. Caleb. Every Sunday, he comes to my house. We make pancakes. He plays with the dog. We dance to old Motown records like fools in the living room. He laughs with his whole body. And sometimes, in the middle of it all, he looks up at me with those eyes that still don't look like mine, and says, "Dada." That's when I know. That's when I feel it. I didn't lose anything. I found him. There was a moment, a few months back, when Megan stood at the end of my driveway, watching me buckle Caleb into the car seat. She hesitated. Then she said, "I don't think I ever told you. Thank you." I didn't answer right away. Just looked at her. At Caleb. At the life we somehow salvaged from the wreckage of the one we thought we wanted. And then I said, "You don't have to." He already does. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how we'll explain it all to him, years from now, when he starts asking questions we can't dodge. But I do know this. I'll be there. Every question, every heartbreak, every scraped knee and school play and late-night call when the world feels too big. I'll be there. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Love isn't always clean. It isn't always fair. But sometimes, it shows up in the quiet, in the man who didn't run, in the child who reaches out anyway, in the story that didn't end when the papers said it should have. It just changed course. And what we built in its place isn't perfect, but it's real. It's ours. And it's enough.